In Baghdad, what foreigners don't see are well-stocked clinics where Saddam Hussein and his rich cronies get first-class treatment, an indication that sanctions have not hurt them in the slightest. Why should the civilian population, including children born since the Gulf War, innocent people, be held hostage to the compliance of a dictator?
UN Sanctions Committee, Ambassador Peter Van Walsum.
It is a difficult problem, but you have to think of one thing. Sanctions, a sanction regime is not a form of development aid. Sanctions are part...
Excuse me, is that... Are you serious in saying that?
I'm serious.
I would think it's the very opposite, isn't it?
Well, no, this is exactly my point. You should realize what sanctions are. And sanctions are one of the coercive measures that the Security Council has at its disposal under Chapter 7. That is to say, it is part of this whole range of measures, starting from declaration to the press, resolution. Then in the end, at the very end of that scale, you will have the military action. Sanctions are the measure just short of military action. And obviously, they hurt. They are like a military measure. They're like a military action.
But who do they hurt?
Well, this is, of course, the problem.
This is the key. Isn't this the key point? Who they hurt?
With military action, too, you have the eternal problem of collateral damage.
I mean, an entire nation of those collateral damage here. Forgive me for interrupting, but let me just say this. Every UN agency dealing with health, food, agriculture and children have reported repeatedly that tens of thousands of the most vulnerable in the society have died and are suffering as a result of sanctions. And do you seriously call that collateral damage?
No, I didn't call it collateral damage.
Well, you're drawing a comparison there.
No, I'm saying that military action has collateral damage. Sanctions are short of military action, but they also have, of course, effects that one doesn't want. And I agree with you that we have to study this further and more extensively to see how we can improve the situation without letting the regime off the hook with regard to the excessive documented interest of the government of Iraq for weapons of mass destruction.
Well, why aren't there sanctions on Israel, which has the only nuclear weapons in the Middle East?
Well, Israel is a country that has been surrounded by countries that try to wipe it out. It's not exactly the same situation.
But it has nuclear weapons.
Well, yes, but we have not yet attacked or put sanctions on every country that...
it attacks Lebanon almost every day of the week. Well, I think these are important. Why aren't there sanctions on Turkey, which has displaced something like 3 million Kurds and caused the deaths of perhaps 30,000 Kurds? Why aren't there sanctions on Turkey?
Yeah. Well, there are many countries that do things that we are not happy with, but this is a situation which has come into being due to the invasion of Kuwait, and that is the explanation of it.
This is Dr. Jawad Al-Ali, a cancer specialist and member of Britain's Royal College of Physicians.
And her chest X-ray shows the nodules. All the lungs are filled with nodules from the cancer of the breast. I don't think we can help her anymore. We just support her. We treat the chest infection, treat the anemia by blood transfusion, and we will wait until she will end her life. Really, we have a problem because the complaints of pain, which is a very severe pain, unrelieved by simple analgesics or painkillers. They need probably morphia. And these drugs are not available. Morphia is not available.
One of the drugs that really seemed crazy that they couldn't have was morphine, the best and oldest pain control medicine in the world, and often called God's own drug, because for everybody that has cancer pain, it is the best drug. And yet they didn't have morphine. They had very little analgesics. The cancer center, when I was there, had a little bottle of aspirin pills, and yet 200 patients are in there, many of them in pain, with a bottle of aspirin to go around them. So it seemed a very bizarre situation.
Do you believe that people have human rights no matter where they live and under what system they live? That the human rights belong to the individual?
Yes.
Well, doesn't that, if you apply that to Iraq, don't then the effects that these sanctions are had, documented by the UN itself, aren't they violating the human rights of literally millions of people?
The human rights in Iraq are a very difficult subject. It is also documented in the United Nations that the regime has committed very serious human rights.
No doubt about
you're
that.
aware of that.
Of course.
Yeah. So I think we are constantly concerned about human rights one way or the other.
But they're no different. You said they're a very difficult subject, but to an ordinary Iraqi, human rights belong to them. You would agree with that, regardless of the fact that they've been lucky or unlucky to have been born in Iraq. Doesn't hurting them violate those human rights?
Yes, but obviously this is exactly why I say that we do not want to hurt the population of Iraq, and this is why we are trying to improve the system.
Yeah. Okay. The numbers of children, 4,000 under fives dying every month. Terrible figures. This has been known for years. Why is it taking so long to deliberate on how to get over this so-called complex issue?
I think we could have solved the matter fairly easily if all members of the Security Council were determined to improve that situation, but at the same time make sure that there are guarantees that Iraq will not again develop weapons of mass destruction. The fact that the major powers disagree on that makes it extremely difficult to solve this situation.
We are now in the process, through the Security Council, of destroying the human rights of the Iraqi people. And for many of us, that is an extraordinary situation, where the chamber responsible for peace and security is neglecting the very provisions of the Charter, which forms the bases of the organization itself. It's an extraordinary phenomenon. There is no democracy in the Security Council. I think if the issue of sanctions on Iraq, after 9 long years, were to go to the General Assembly, we'd see a very large majority overturning those sanctions tomorrow.
On February the 13th, this man resigned his job. Hans von Sponeck, the senior United Nations representative in Iraq, followed his predecessor Dennis Halliday, saying he could no longer tolerate the suffering caused by sanctions.
I do not think it is fair for such a long period of time to make a civilian population a subject to bargaining. And what we are seeing here is too often exactly that.
Paying the Price, Killing the Children of Iraq is a documentary by the filmmaker John Pilger. It is distributed in the United States by Bullfrog Films. Those are just excerpts. You can go to our website for more information at www.democracynow.org. Our email address is mail, M-A-I-L, @democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Chris Abrams, Mike Burke, Angie Karen, Anna Noguera, and Alex Wolf. Mike DeFilippo is our engineer. Special thanks to Uri Galed and Angela Alston, Emily Kunstler, and Johnny Sender. Also to Karen Ranucci and Dennis Moynihan and Fatima Mojadidi, Simba Russo, and Orlando Richards. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for listening to another edition of Democracy Now!